going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I've got Edward Mosley here, and he is a retired Marine combat veteran, and he's witnessed firsthand the transformative power of effective leadership in real life, high stakes situations where decisions carry immediate and profound consequences. And his journey as a combat veteran has equipped him with a deep understanding of adversity, resilience, and the intricacies of teamwork under pressure. And if you can't figure out based on that bio, today we're going to talk about leadership and how we communicate under pressure, because I'm sure we all have a story that we can talk about of where we had great leaders who didn't cave under the pressure, and we had not so great leaders who would then cave under the pressure and they would just yell at you and all sorts of bad things. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly today. But before we get into that, Edward, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Philip, for having me on the show today. And I'm excited. And let's just get into it, man.
Yeah, man. So tell me about this transition real quick as we talk about the leadership side. But before that, so you obviously went into the military, you went into the Marines, and I'm sure you probably didn't go in just thinking like, hey, I'm going to be a leader. Tell us about like where you were at before you kind of became this leader in the Marines, which then obviously transitioned outside of that. And we'll talk about that here in a second too, of what you do currently.
Yeah.
But tell us about that journey.
From Dallas, Texas, was, graduating high school and decided, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And I submitted to several colleges and got accepted to those colleges. But, at that time, it was one of those, it was a financial thing, so it's like, do I want to put this financial burden on my family? And, obviously I said no. So joined the Marine Corps at 17, turned 18 in boot camp, and life completely changed. So it's kind of funny. I had a head full of hair, but then I went to the boot camp and they cut it all off. So I'm right back at that bald head again. But that's where the journey started. Being in Dallas, they send you to San Diego Marine Corps boot camp. So I went there, and what I instantly noticed was there was about 60 or so people in my platoon, and it didn't matter where we was from, if it was Idaho, Tennessee, Texas, wherever. So each of us came in with a different perspective on life. Some never seen Black people before, some not working with white folks or Asian or whatever. And so you come in with those biases. You get into this environment and they break you completely down. They take every bias you have out of your body, and it makes you realize that you just need the next person, next to you. They put us in situations where we really depended on the next person. And it became life and death in some situations, and so that's where the journey started. As far as the Marine Corps motto is, if there's two Marines, there's always somebody senior. There's always somebody who was either promoted before you. That person was instantly, automatically the leader. All the decisions came from that person. So as early as E2, E3 in the Marine Corps, as the senior Lance Corporal, I had, PFCs and privates under my charge, and I'm telling them what to do. It could be something as simple as field day, or, cleaning up the barracks, or just something so simple like that. But you're given leadership responsibilities right off the bat. And so, 30 years later, 40 years later, here I am. And those things just built me into the person I am today.
And so tell us a little bit before we go into that. I like that background. I do think that the military does an exceptional job on creating leaders. But tell us a little bit real quick about what you do currently to be able to help leaders, because that is definitely a unique story. But I also want to get this other side of you real quick, and then we're going to kind of dissect into these two different areas.
Cool. So what I currently do is I currently work as a professional career coach for a federal agency. And in that, my background is everything from workforce development, training development, organizational change, leadership, executive coaching, leadership coaching. So that's my background. That's my military background. That's my educational background, and that's my world. That's what I operate in. And so what I currently do is I help build coaching programs, internal coaching programs for organizations. And then I also provide coaching for those organizations that just don't have the capability or the capacity for an internal coaching program. And what that entails is, let's say if it's internal, I will work with the organization, and they may identify certain individuals that may have expertise in various areas that they want them to provide coaching to their employees. So I will help set up their program, develop the entire process of the coaches, get their training, and then how they're going to solicit for employees to become coached. External, an organization may call me in to help talk to their leaders, their aspiring leaders in their leadership development programs, and provide coaching or provide executive leadership coaching to their executive staffs. So there's several paths of how I help organizations, and how we do that is we look at some of the problems or issues that the organization is currently having. What I'm seeing a lot of, Philip, is high turnover rates. I'm seeing a lot of EEO, equal opportunity complaints, a lot of grievances, a lot of performance issues, not a lot of low employee engagement. And these are big issues that organizations just have issues with. And sometimes it could be communication issues with leaders and employees. And we'll come into an assessment and we'll work up a program and a plan on how do we change that. So we'll create a change initiative. But sometimes some organizations just need a little help with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I can definitely see where this whole military thing came in to that. And one of the things that I've seen in these large organizations, and some of it makes sense, but what you mentioned with the military aspect is something that I don't think we think a lot about, and we don't put a lot of merit to it. And you mentioned that when there's two people, one's a senior in some way, shape, or form. Could literally just be they're 2 days older at a minimum, but they're senior in some way, or they've been in the military for 2 days longer, let's say. Or of course there's a ranking there as well. But when we get to the corporate world, that doesn't exactly translate. Typically you have management, senior management, and then you've got employees, and they're all, if they're non-management, they're technically quote unquote the same level. Even though we know there's a little bit of hierarchy, we still treat it as if it's the same level. And I think this is where corporations kind of fail. And some of it, we could say it's probably because that's how they just kind of want it. They just want people just to do a job. They're not trying to really help promote people necessarily. Yeah. But I feel like the military and what you talked about, that you have somebody that if they are above you in the ranks, then they are automatically a leader with or without technically that title. But when it comes to the corporate world, we don't see that at all. If you don't have that leadership title, you're not considered a leader. And so I would love for you to kind of expand. Why do you think that is within corporation that we see this discrepancy there, that the military had that and it makes great leaders and makes people that work very hard and work well together, but then we transition to the corporate world and it seems like unless if the manager told me to, I'm not doing it. It doesn't matter. I mean, and of course, it's not all cases, but that seems to be a very prevalent thing, that which in turn makes the corporate life really hard for leaders and business owners.
Yeah. I think what you were asking, you kind of broke in and out a little bit. One of the things that I will say, so let's just break it down like this. When I came in, a fire team was 12 people. So we had 12 Marines. We had one squad leader. So the one squad leader had the ultimate control over that particular 12. So a platoon would be 48 people, and we would break them down into 4 squads. And as you can say, the 4 squads are for divisions within a department. So a platoon, like we can say, is a department, and then each of the different squads could be a division within the department. And each squad, let's say squad A, squad 1, squad 2, squad 3, squad 4. Each one of them are departments within that. I mean, divisions within the department. And so within a squad, there's 4 leads. There's 4 leaders. And we further break that down in each person within that team of 4 has a specific job that they do. And let's just say one could be, I don't want to use military terms, but one could be doing project A, the other's project B, project C, project D. And each one of those folks within that team has a very important job for the team to accomplish the mission for that particular fire team. So we break it down in the military, in the Marine Corps, I should say, to the minute job of one individual. Vince, if one individual on one fire team is not successful, that entire fire team is not successful, and it affects the entire squad. Each squad, or I should say, in our scenario we're using, each division has an area of responsibility. And so just like in a corporation, each division, departments, each levels, they have areas of responsibility. And if anything breaks within that particular area, it could be a detriment to the entire fire team, to the entire department. So let's go from just this scenario to, let's just say, real wartime environment, right? If fire team A has the responsibility of providing security for our left flank, and somebody in that particular fire team is not doing their job, then the entire department, the entire division has a vulnerable flank, and therefore it's impacting return on investment, and it's impacting the overall results and productivity of the organization. So, and I'm tell you how this really works, right? And you say it doesn't align or it doesn't translate. If something were to happen to the squad leader that's, say, in front of us, and he's no longer able to do his job, if we turn left, then the person in lead at that particular point could be fire team leader A. Now it's his responsibility to lead the entire department in that direction. So we don't just because the leader, this is a great point. I want to bring up. Let's say you have a CEO, and we would call him a general in this military scenario. He's not always at the front, because we do this thing called leapfrogging. So one group may be in the lead, and then our general may be with that group, and then the next group may jump ahead. That way, we're not giving our enemy, our competitors, the opportunity to know where our lead is, our general is. And so how we do that is we're training each individual to know every particular part of, what that fire team or what that office is doing. And what I see happen a lot is, in organizations, only one person knows a job. And if that one person leaves or becomes disgruntled, then that entire project is basically paused. And so that's one of the big issues that I think we got to get away from is cross training. We have to cross train. We have to build succession plans. How many organizations that do not have succession plans right now?
So many. I would say
it is
almost all of them.
Almost all of them, right? They're scared to identify who may be the next successor, and that's a bad place for us to be in.
Yeah, exactly. And so I appreciate you bringing this out. In so many things that we could really dissect from this, but you're right. The succession planning, having people that are backups, and one of the things that you mentioned, not obviously from the military perspective, you don't want to have the leader always out in front, and really even from the corporate side, the leader shouldn't always be the one necessarily leading But
Yep.
unfortunately, that's kind of been probably, I mean, really from both sides. So employees just kind of have that expectation now. But then also leaders or a organization has created it where only the leader can make a decision. And I think that's really
Yeah.
the downfall with a lot of corporations is that they basically make the leader make the decision. But then, of course, the leader doesn't know he's not the specialist or he or she is not the specialist. So, therefore, they're really not adequate to make the decision. And so there's
Yeah.
just a lot of redundancy because now if I'm the specialist, I've got to go tell you what we need to do and give you enough information so you're informed. So then you can say, okay, yeah, this is the decision we should go with, rather than saying, hey, Philip, I'm going to empower you to make the right decision. If you want to run it by me, that's great. Let's talk about
Yeah.
it. And I'm going to give you, this is where senior management wants to go with the business, or the business wants to go in this direction. But you know the business, you know your business, which is this specific work. I'm going to let you run with that and make certain decisions. We don't allow enough of those decisions, I feel like, from management to the working class, if you will, within an organization. So, what are some things
Yeah.
that you think we could do to help with that?
Yeah. I think we have to understand, we have to accept the fact that there is a difference between a manager and a leader. We have to understand that fact. And I can be a great manager. And what I think we're doing now is we're promoting people based on their loyalty to the company. If I've been there for 10 years or 5 years, I mean 5, 10, or 15 years, then you're saying, okay, you know what, they've been here long enough. Let's go ahead and promote them rather than, somebody new. And I think if we start promoting people based on performance and based on, what they bring to the organization, that's a little different than promoting just because they're loyal. They may be a great manager of a project, but when it comes to leading people, they just don't have that quality, and that's okay. Um, we get caught up in leader, manager, supervisor, executive. We get caught up in these titles, and one of the things that I liked about General Colin Powell, what I read in his book was he didn't like square tables in his offices. He liked round tables. And the reason he liked that was because when you have a square table, it puts him at one end and the other person at another end. It's making them feel like they're junior, And with a round table, everybody feels like they have an opinion. There's no boundaries there. So I like that concept. That concept to me translates into empowerment and inspiring. And leaders should be empowering and inspiring others to be great and do bigger and better things. That's one of the things I think we have to work better at is putting leaders in leadership position and keeping managers in management positions. Managers do the operations. They do the day-to-day moving and aligning the job and task that's going on. But some managers are just not forecasters. They don't forward think. They're not strategic thinkers, and that's okay. That is okay. Um, so we got to do better with that. Putting people in management positions and putting people in leadership positions. I think we have to do better at um, providing leadership development to those leaders in positions prior to they become leaders in those positions. On average, most leaders are not receiving leadership development until about the 7 or 8 year mark of being in a leadership position. Now, I look at that from the perspective of how many performance appraisals, how many employees have I negatively impacted with me not knowing, how to be a leader. The other thing is they should identify the type of leader that they are very, very early on in their career. Now you can pivot. You can pivot. Um, for years, corporations have only worked in this transactional type leadership. They've operated in um, transactional, authoritative, and those type of leadership models or leadership styles, they no longer work in this modern industry. So if you're not willing to be a transformational leader, a servant leader, and really kind of lead based on who you have in your organization is going to to, continue to, I don't want to say fail, but you're gonna always have major issues in your organization.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's sad to see. Well, two parts to that. So one, the transactional authoritative leader versus a transformative servant leader. We are
Yeah.
seeing more of that, and we need so much more of that, especially with the younger generation.
Yeah.
It's not just about what do I need to do, but why am I doing it? And through creating that transformation or trying to serve the people that you're working with, they want to work for you more, and you get so much more out of them than just demanding it out of them.
Yeah.
And the other aspect that was alarming to me to hear that it's 7 or 8 years into them being a leader before they even get leadership training. And then you wonder why we have such terrible problems with leadership, because nobody's trained. And immediately in my mind says, why aren't you training people to become the leader? You're just appointing them to be quote unquote leader, and then you try and see what they can do. And there, you can't sit there and put somebody through training and that's all you do, because then obviously they don't learn either. But you need to give them some kind of guidance, whether that be a training class or a mentor or something to help them be able to succeed. Because yeah, like you said, the other part to that was that the fact that they've been leading that long and not really leading. I say leading with quotes, because they have the title, and now what did they do to damage employees within that company because they didn't know how to lead properly, and so they couldn't assess the situation properly, and therefore they gave them maybe not a demotion, but they gave them a poor review. And how many of them are there and now they've done the silent quitting, or they literally left the company because they realized that leadership doesn't pay attention to what they're doing. And really both of them are becoming more and more prevalent, unfortunately. And so what would you say for leaders? Like, how could they transition themselves from being transactional to transformative or servant leaders if they kind of have that old school style of leadership?
Yeah, that's huge. That is huge, because if I had to give you an answer without thinking about it, I would say out of 100 leaders, half of them won't make that change. They won't. That 50% of them will not make a change, because they will go back to, well, it's been working this way, so why should I change now? So that's I would even say it maybe even be more. What I do know is I read somewhere here recently where there was a study that came out that said that over 75 to 80% of organizations are going back to top-down leadership. Now, think about that. That's going back to an authoritative style leadership. What the C-suite says is how we're going to operate. So you're basically telling your employees, there's no bottom-up leadership. There's no bottom-up input. We don't care what you're saying. This is what we see. This is what we're doing. So now you're putting leadership back in this bubble that has no clue of what's affecting the organization, because they don't want to hear it. They're going to guide and direct from the top. One of the things that I do is I have 3 programs that I work with. It's kind of a pyramid shape, right? And so the bottom part is self-discovery. That's individual. That's where the person, the leader, they really figure out who they are, and their core principles, their leadership styles. And you may have a combination of all of them, or several pieces of there's about 15 or so concepts and theories out there now about leadership styles. And then the next step is, as you're going up, is about changing. How do you make the change and transition your style and involve and engage your employees? And the next top piece is strategic. It's more strategic, so it's more organizational. And I think that's how you change. I think you have to get your leaders that are in these key positions and your managers um, to understand that they have to know who they are. They have to know what their goals, desires, dislikes. If once they know that, then they're able to figure out the different type of leadership styles that they have, what works, what does not work. And once you get them to see that, that's when the light bulb comes on. That's when that transition, that's when that change takes place. And they become better leaders for your organization. The other thing that you mentioned, we have to get away from the title so much. Like I know in certain in federal services, they will say like HR specialist or HR generalist or HR supervisor. And you're supposed to know, how to be a supervisor solely based on you being a generalist before, and then you moved up in rank to a specialist. Or now you've done it so long to you apply for a supervisor position. Now you're supervising 10 people, but you may have been a poor team member when you were a generalist, And so just because you've been in the organization for 10 years or so, and you've met certain little tick marks in the required qualifications for the supervisory position, they promote you. And the way that I know a lot of government agencies work is until you become a supervisor, an HR supervisor, a management supervisor, until you get the supervisor title, they will not send you to leadership development courses. You can go to, kind of an introduction to leadership, but to get those core courses and very pointed and strategic leadership supervisory courses, you don't get them until you get in a position of supervisory or position of leadership. And that could be 3 years or 5 years too late.
Yeah.
And you're automatically, when you get that supervisory title, within that first year, you are writing performance appraisals on people that you're leading that you may have had issues with when you were not a supervisor. So to your point, you're going to impact them right off the bat. And it may take you 3 or 4 years to get supervisory or leadership training, but either that employee is gone because they know, oh, yep, we had issues before they became my supervisor and it's not going to work now. So what did you really do,
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. And I know for myself, so speaking kind of from the other side of this, as I've went and sought out my own leadership skills, going to trainings, learning about business and learning different aspects than the quote unquote specialist role, being an engineer and everything, just doing that technical side, I started to see what it was like for my management team. And I could see more of their perspective because I understood that now. So I could look at the knowledge, face the knowledge and understand that versus when I'm just the engineer. It was hard for me to understand why would they make a decision like that. Now, sometimes do I agree with everything management does? No. I mean, managers don't agree with each other and they have the leadership, they have the title, all that stuff. But it allows me to understand more of where they're coming from. And going back, and we're kind of hitting the nail on the head on this point, we keep just driving it in. But the thing is, if the person doesn't understand leadership going into a leadership role, how can you expect them to come out the door as a great leader? I mean, when we do this on the specialist side, we say, if you don't have the experience, you're not getting that job. But then we allow them to get the job as a leader without leadership experience or knowledge. Kind of questionable.
Yeah, scratches my head too. Yeah.
So what are some things that you've noticed that work really well as far as like communication? So I'd like to kind of dive a little bit into like communicating as a leader. Maybe you've got that team or you've got that person on your team that you see that potential in them, but they're working for an organization like we're talking about that they won't give that training to that person. But if they just had a little bit of development, they could really be a great leader once they were on that leadership path within a company. What are some things that you would tell a leader to help mold this person, this high potential person, to become a leader?
Yeah. Wow. Again, right off the bat, I can think of organizations I've personally worked for. They have programs that may be like one of the titles is aspiring leaders, right? And I believe so. Here's what I do believe, right? I believe that not everybody wants to be in leadership positions. I do. I think out of 100 people, probably 10%, only 10% really want to be in leadership positions. And so I think that if we take that 10% that have really identified themselves and volunteered and said, hey, I like this. I really want to, be in that particular position at some point. We take that group and we start molding them. I think something as simple as leadership shadowing works perfect, because now, and you give them a month. If you ask them, I think if you ask 10 people, hey, where do you want to be in the next 5-10 years? Some of them will say, I want to have money, I want to have this. Somebody's going to say, I want to be promoted, I want to, own my own business. Then why are we not aligning that particular person up with somebody in our organization that's already there? So now we have we've planted a seed in this particular person. He may want to be a CEO. She may want to be a director. Well, show them what a director does on a day-to-day basis 5 years early, so they can start doing those things to become a director, rather than making them a director and then they say, oh, I didn't know how to do this. Well, so I think that's something we can do. I think shadowing is awesome. I 1000% believe that we're only focusing our coaching and our mentoring once they become senior, high level employees to senior level employees. I think that's backwards. I think if we start giving them mentoring and coaching at the junior levels, at the early time in their career, then I think you have a better employee, at year 10. Because now they're able to walk through some things in their mind, and we're able to ask them, in 10 years, do you see yourself with the company? In 5 years, where do you want to be in the company? And now they're able to develop these development plans, and they can put it on their wall and they can see, okay, this is where I want to be. So I need to. How many times have you seen or heard of an employee getting this promotion, right? But part of the promotion, they have to go international, or they have to go to another part of the country. And they're really stumped at like, oh, I like being on the East Coast, but in order for me to gain this knowledge or take this promotion, I got to go to the West Coast. But I think if you give them that opportunity to understand that early in their career, that they're going to have to travel and get certain different perspective, international or West Coast, East Coast, North, South, I think it'll make them a better engaged employee. So I think those are two things you can do. The other thing I think you can do is publicize transparency and openness from the leadership, from the highest levels of the organization's 100% commitment to professional development. I think if you start talking at the highest levels and pushing it down, the importance of professional development, the importance of education, being a better employee, more knowledgeable employee, it will show the employees that you're invested in them becoming better, which in turn will make them a better employee for the organization. Philip, I can't tell you how many times I've had senior leaders say to me, why should they invest in professional development, spend money in professional development, and they know as soon as the employee gets that certificate, gets that credential, within a year or two, they're going to leave the organization. Well, you're missing the point. That employee should be so motivated to get that credential, get that new training, and bring it back into the organization. That's when you know that you're keeping employees that want to be in the organization. That's when you know you're doing a good job. If the employee is getting the education and they're leaving, they wanted to leave before they've been wanting to leave. They just needed the avenue to get out.
Yeah, and that makes me think of a senior leader that I really heard this, but I knew that senior leader and everything. And there was a coach, we had an executive coach, and they were talking about the senior leaders like, well, what happens if we train them and they leave? And that executive coach said, well, what happens if we don't train them and they stay? So they're so focused on spending the money and having somebody leave. But then if we don't spend the money and they stay, that's really worse because you're not going to have 100% of people leave. Yeah. But just like you said, if the person doesn't have the education, they have no way out. So therefore they're going to stay, but now they're not educated. Like that sounds like a pretty terrible situation. So why not just go ahead and educate them? And so I really think it comes down to money at the end of the day, which I get is a concern, especially, well, really any size business, but especially at the smaller business level, let's say 20 employees and under. Yeah, cash flow is a huge thing. As you start to get bigger, hopefully you've worked out to get that cash flow better and you started putting that in the budget for training. But I understand that when you're really small, that being a struggle. But if you are a massive company, that should be something that should be able to be focused on, and you should focus on that because, again, what happens if you don't train your people and they stay? That's a pretty bad spot to be in.
I think the other part of that is, do your employees feel valued? And I think if you can, I mean, let's face it, with this modern world, post COVID, a lot of organizations are operating in a 40 to 50-year-old structure. They're taking this model of, 5 days a week. We need to be in the office, in the building, 10 hours or 12 hours a day. And that's no longer valid anymore. There's so many things going on with work-life balance. We have family issues. We have, let's face it, we have daycare issues. And, and with the IT, we have people that we have remote work opportunities, and people are getting more done in a remote work environment or working half days in the office than they've gotten done before, and they're more happier. So, I asked a lot of supervisors this question. I said, hey, pre-COVID, if their performance appraisal scale is 1 is subpar, 3 is average, 5 is great. I asked a lot of folks, pre-COVID, were you giving your employees 5s? And they would raise their hand. Yeah. I said, okay. I say, during COVID, did any of your 3s move to 5s? And some of them said, yeah. And I said, so did any of your 5s move down to 1s or 3s? They were like, no. So obviously, they don't have to be in the building, in the office, in their desk, in that cubicle to do their job even greater. So you can't justify to me that you have to have them in an office space, in a building, for them to do greater work. Half employees around, especially in the DC area, they're spending 2 to 4 hours a day just in traffic trying to get to work. And then you want them to do an 8 to 10 hour day. That's 14 hours of doing work, getting home, probably getting to sleep if you don't have kids, And I think that's the other thing. A lot of organizations really have to look at that whole work-life balance. Would you rather have an employee that's productive, engaged, and performing at a high level, or would you rather have them in the seats so you can see them and not productive and not engaged? What's the trade-off you want,
Yeah, exactly. And a little bit of a tangent there. I actually was listening to a podcast. So I didn't look up this fact, but I'm not surprised by it, but they were talking more about from the economical perspective. But they were saying that most people's commutes over the last 4 years have went from like 10 miles to 27 miles one way, and that was more because of housing prices and all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
that made me just think of that. But I mean, I think about coming into the office and sitting there, and what happens a lot of times is, yeah, maybe you're not working a full 8 hours at home, but are you really even working a full 8 hours in the office? A lot of times, what happens is these people, they're at the office and now they feel that pressure from the manager to be around. And so now, especially if you're talking about like a manufacturing environment, you've got a lot of space. You can go walk out. If you work in the office, you can go walk out to the manufacturing floor. You can toot around, if you will. You can go to the cafeteria if there's one there, and you can kind of get away and do these coffee networking things. But you're not even actually working. But when you're at home, you don't have that distraction of a coworker coming up and randomly talking to you. You don't have the
Yeah.
distraction of, well, let me go get coffee with my coworker, like let's catch up. And so you're actually able to be more productive even if you don't work a full 8 hour day. And I think that's a big thing, that it's a hard conception, or it's hard to conceptualize. We want to say, well, you're in the office for 8 hours, but then you're at home and maybe you're not working the 8 hours. But the thing is,
Yeah.
you're working more within, even if it was a 6 hour window versus the 8 hours at work. And then on top of that, we've seen there's studies out there saying that people work more hours at home because they
Yeah.
enjoy it, and they do enjoy their work, but they're happy to be at home and they're willing to do that. And I think that's one of those things we think as leaders, oh, people want to get paid more. And of course, we all want to get paid more. But that's one of those little things that we can do to create a compensation without actually coming out of pocket with money. That appreciation, like we talked about earlier, letting people work from home a couple of days a week or whatever. There's little things
Yeah.
like that that don't directly cost the company money that will make employees more happy. Yes, the training, that does cost some kind of money, but as typically a one-time payment. You pay, let's say, $3,000 to go to a leadership training development class, and they go there, and of course you're paying their hourly rate, salary, whatever, to go to that. But that's not an extra $3,000 you had to put
Yeah.
on their salary for the next 30 years if they work for you. That was a one-time thing. And I think we don't think about that enough, how that actually replaces a little bit of that salary increase and creates that appreciation that people want and will keep people around.
Yeah. I think the part of that is, you're spot on there, and I think part of that is pre-COVID. A lot of agencies, state, local, federal, leased a lot of office spaces within downtowns, within cities, and when we went to COVID, we sent everybody home. But the leases that these organizations bought or took out, they're 10, 15, 20-year leases. So, and then, so for instance, a couple buildings up here, right? Let's say if that building housed, let's just say 1,000 employees, what the entrepreneurs, how they made out was, they set up their shops at the subway exits and entrances. They set up their shops along the routes that people would, if they took the train, if they took the bus or whatever, or in these leased spaces, they set up cafeterias and things in the basements or in the lobbies, and that was coffee, and there's donuts, and there's lunch, and when you're in a building, and you have brought in entrepreneurs that have lunch and breakfast and stuff like that, you're actually helping them as well. And so I think that's when it goes back to your statement about the money. When we went to COVID, those entrepreneurs' businesses, they went down because they didn't have the 1,000 people. They didn't see the 1,000 people every day. But on top of that, the organizations, if they were paying $10,000 in leased space, they're still paying that $10,000 monthly bill with nobody in the building. But on the flip side, how many lights? How much did they save in light bills? for electricity or plumbing. 1,000 people in the building, you're flushing water, constantly. So you don't have as much expenses in water or tear down in lights or light fixtures or or carpet or things of that nature. So it's a juggling act. Is there a savings? Is there a savings and loss? There is in any direction, but at the end of the day, we're not going back to how it used to be pre-COVID. Not going to happen. And organizations are finding out right now, if they do not become flexible with how they are hiring, and they only want people to come in the office, that future employee would never accept that position. They would never apply for the position. Those organizations that have relooked at their structure, relooked at their position descriptions, and said, okay, is this a in the office kind of position? Is this a telework? Is this a remote work? And if the answer is we can make this position a remote work position, and I can hire somebody in California and I'm in Virginia, but he's an expert, then why wouldn't I want to hire that person in California rather than taking a subpar person in Virginia and try to train them to be an expert? Those are the trade-offs that organizations are going to have to do. And if they don't go back to their position descriptions and their requirements and things that's needed, then that organization is going to continue to lose. They're going to lose employees because they're not going to want to stay, or they're going to go to environments and organizations that are flexible and will allow them to telework and remote work.
Yeah, agreed. And so, I know we've talked about a lot of different things, but if you could sum up in like one word, and I know it's tough to do with leadership, but one word, what leaders should be going into the future, what would that one word be?
Transparent. I think if we become transparent at how the organization is performing, the need, the vision, reshaping it, if we become transparent with our employees, then they can make a better decision on if they should stay, how they can be a part of it, if they're a part of the vision, if they're a part of the plan. So I would say transparency.
I like it. And I agree with you. I think transparency is a big thing. Something else I was thinking about was flexibility within that, or adaptability. Yeah. But it's hard to say one word, but I like transparency. Right. I think that's a very, very important one for sure. And so, Edward, if people want to reach out to you, see what you got going on, you got a lot of great content. You talk a lot about leadership and development and change within companies. Where's the best place for them to reach out?
Philip, I made it easy for me and everybody else. On any platform, I am Edward E. Mosley Jr. Edward E. Mosley Jr. So if you go to LinkedIn, I'm Edward E. Mosley Jr. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, webpage is edwardemosleygr.com. So I made it real easy for myself.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a great way. I wish I could have done that for myself. Got hacked, all this good stuff. One account was taken with Philip Sessions. Yep. So maybe I should have made that more, but yeah, that's awesome that you did that, and we'll have that in the show notes. But Edward, Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and bringing such great value. The talk of leadership, we could talk for days upon years really about that, but this is such an important topic. So thank you for coming on to share your value.
You're welcome, and thanks for having. And hey, like you said, we could go down. I hope we never got into the chaos in leadership. Becoming a leader. So yeah, I am, I was excited to be here. Love the topic. So you ever want me back on? Let's do it again. Let's keep it rolling, man.
Let's do it. We'll have to do that for sure. And just talk about chaos.
Oh yeah. That's how I got started in chaos.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks, man. Thanks so much. And for those of you listening, definitely go give Edward a follow. You won't be as disappointed in the content that he shares.